Hey everybody, my name is Buzz. I'm with Mudhole Custom Tackle's instructional staff. And for this segment, we're going to talk about tip-top removal. Tip-top removal is probably the most popular and most used rod repair techniques. And we're going to go over some of the pros and cons and help you get through how to replace your tip-tops. There's two different methods for replacing the tip-top. The most common is called the heat method, and the second is actually the cutting method. And we'll go through both of those. So we have a tip-top on this rod right here that we need to replace. And hopefully it is held on with a tip-top epoxy that is heat sensitive. And that's going to make it easier for us. Most custom rods use the tip-top epoxy, the proper tip-top epoxy, and many mass-produced rods also use the proper. But sometimes you're going to get those that epoxy it on permanently. We'll show you how to go through and replace it using both methods and the equipment and supplies that you're going to need. So using the heat method, the first thing we want to do is get out a set of needle nose pliers. We want to grab that tip top on the frame or the ring. Remember, we don't care if we crack the ring, we're replacing the tip top, so we want to grab it up here. Don't grab it on the tube of the tip top because we can actually pinch that tube, making it smaller and making it more difficult to get off. So using a heat source of either a cigarette lighter, which is a very high temperature heat source, or better yet, an alcohol torch with denatured alcohol in it, that's going to be our heat source for breaking the bond of this tip-top epoxy. A couple of passes. We just want to warm up that tip-top epoxy and it'll pull right off. Now we still have some epoxy residue on the end of this tip top. Just grab a dull razor blade, put it at a 90-degree angle, and let's scrape off all that excess epoxy. Tip top has now been removed using the heat method. So we have a tip top on here that we cannot remove with a standard heat method. So we're going to have to cut it off. To cut it off, you need what's preferable is a Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel and some safety glasses. So we're going to cut this as close to the metal of the tip top as we possibly can. Good eye protection, good hand protection. We want it nice and square when we cut it off. Now we have to determine what size tube of the tip top we're going to put on here. If you have to order it, then you'll know the proper tube size, or if you have a supply, then you can go to the correct tube size. To do that, we're going to use a tip-top gauge. This gauge helps you identify the size of different guides and also the size of tubes for tip-tops needed, as well as sizing the tip-tops themselves. So all we'll do is we'll use the holes right here, and we're going to put that on the end of the rod until we get it so that a ½ inch of the blank goes through the hole. And these holes are numbered with the proper size. So I'll slide these on here. And I find that it starts to get a little tension, and about a halfway down with the size 5.5 on the gauge means the tube size for the tip top when we order them needs to be a 5.5. So I pull out a tip top with a 5.5, and now we're ready to put a new tip top on based on the size of the tube from our tip top gauge. To properly put the tip top on, we're going to use tip top cement. This is a sort of a hot glue with a higher temperature melting point, which is used to keep tip tops on the rods. And we're going to use what we call the roll method. It's very easy to use and very easy to manipulate this stuff. All I'm going to do, cigarette lighter, light it up for a 3 or 4 count. I want the end of this tip-top cement to start to melt a little bit. Then putting it on your workbench, not your dining room table, but your workbench, just wipe it across the table, give it just a second to cool, and then take your finger and start to roll it. So I'm rolling up a piece, as you can see in the camera here. It's more of a cylinder, and because it's still warm, it's still pliable. So if I have too long of a piece for my tube size, I can cut it to length. If it is too thick to fit into the tube, I can continue to manipulate it and roll it until it gets thinner. So I'm just going to take a piece that I think is the proper size, put it right in the tube itself. So I have the epoxy piece inside the tip-top tube. I'm grabbing onto the frame of the tip-top, not by the tube because I don't want to crush it. Just briefly heat it up a little bit, get that hot melt tip-top cement to liquefy. Put it on the end of the rod. Push it all the way down. Rotate it around the rod so I coat the outside of that rod and the inside of that tube with the epoxy. Then I just line up the tip top with the guides and give it about a 15 to 20 seconds to cure up, and that's going to hold that tip top in place. If I need to move that tip top to realign it with the guides, a small amount of heat on that tip top will break that bond, and I'll be able to readjust that tip top. During the finishing process, it's important that you put finish where the tip top tube meets the blank. We want to put a little drop of finish on there while it's turning in your dryer. The point of that is that finish will help a little bit in holding that tip top on the rod in hot climates, but also as the line is coming down the rod through the guides and it gets to the tip top, that line, especially braided line, won't hang up on the edge of that tip top tube because we have finish on there. It'll pass the line a lot quicker. And that's how you replace the tip top on a fishing rod.